You're listening to the Journey Podcast. Join us today for a deeply moving episode as we explore our guest's profound journey of addiction and recovery. This episode contains adult subject matter, and some listeners may be triggered by this content. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Journey Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this compelling episode, we embark on a deeply personal and inspiring journey with our guest, who courageously shares his transformative experience with addiction and recovery. Having battled alcoholism for 11 years, our guest takes us through the harrowing depth of addiction and the pivotal moment when he made the life-changing decision to pursue sobriety. James Kachnoskie is currently 11 years, 11 months sober from alcohol. He hosts a podcast aimed at sharing his story and stories like his to hopefully help people find the positive impact getting into recovery can have in their life. James suffered trauma at an early age and lost his best friend at 21 due to an accidental drowning. This impactful event led to depression and alcohol addiction, culminating in 11 years of struggles and hardship for himself and his family. James spent 11 years destroying his life. When he found himself hitting rock bottom and after a lot of internal struggles, he decided he finally needed to get sober or he might not survive. This moment changed his life forever. 1 year into sobriety, he met his wife, a true love story which blossomed into 2 children, 2 country moves, and many ups and downs. But sobriety has given James a life worth living and cherishing. Let's meet James Kachnoskie. Hi, James. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because addiction and recovery is such a profound and important topic for holistic healing. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited about this.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's a topic that we haven't often talked about on the podcast yet before. So I'm actually very glad that you're joining me today and that we can shed some light on all of this and share your story. So talking about your story, do you want to give us a little bit of insight about where you came from, what happened, and what you're doing today and how you came to be here?
All right. My name is James. I'm from a very small town in Pennsylvania called Shamokin, Pennsylvania. I was born there. It has about 5,000 people, a very tiny coal region town. So I lived there most of my life. When I was growing up, I ended up losing my best friend at the age of, he was 20, I was 21. And that kind of started my troubles with alcohol. I was suffering from depression and not being able to cope with what had happened. I started to drink heavily. So I spent a lot of time drinking, 11 and a half years. I found sobriety. I got to the point where I was at this teetering point where I couldn't decide whether I wanted to keep drinking or to quit drinking. But I knew that if I continued, I'd never have the things that I truly wanted out of life. I'd never be able to hold a job. I'd never be able to have a family. I would just mess those things up. I ended up, after a New Year's Eve, of getting really, really badly drunk and being a complete idiot, throwing up all over my buddy's house. It was a mess. I decided a couple weeks after New Year's in 2012 that I was done. And I quit drinking. I didn't do anything. I didn't go to any programs. I didn't do anything. I knew that I had to change my life, and I started making changes. And yeah, I started making changes for the better. I was gym, running, mixed martial arts. I got into a lot of things that kind of occupied my time. I did that for a while. I ended up meeting my wife. We met. She's from the UK. I'm from the US. She did a program where she came over to the US to do a camp. And we met through this camp. And yeah, it basically changed my life. It changed her life. I chased her down in England. I said, "Hey, I think I love you." And she was like, "This American boy is crazy." We got together. She came back for another summer and we dated and ended up falling in love and getting married and having a child. And she moved to the US. I mean, there's so many components to this story. I'm trying to give like a brief overview of it. So she came to the US. We found out we were going to be parents after a year. We decided we are going to move back to the UK. So I moved my life to the United Kingdom and I've been over here for about 5 years now. So that's like the brief glancing overview of my life story. But I can answer any questions that you would like to ask about it.
What a journey you've had. Wow. It sounds like a very challenging and difficult beginning to your journey, but where you are at now sounds like you have made so many changes and you've come out that other end a different person almost. So I'm very, very glad for you. And you said that you came to a point where you realized that if you didn't make changes, you couldn't have the life that you wanted. So you said there was nothing available for you in terms of support. So did you just decide one day to just stop drinking and you really went for this cold turkey, or was there support available that helped you along this in any kind of way?
Yeah, coming to that decision, I was kind of in this really weird space in life. I was holding a job, but I was getting really drunk every weekend, really drunk, blackout drunk, like dangerous drunk. I was drunk driving. I was doing a lot of bad things. I basically was like living my life for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I would drink those days and then I would go to work and I would do that. That cycle would repeat and repeat and repeat. I just found it, I got to this point where I just couldn't see this continuing. And I ended up meeting a girl and she had a 2 year old. She had a little 2 year old little boy. And we had started dating. And I started to see life that I could potentially have as being with somebody that had a child or having a child on my own and what that looked like with the drinking that I was doing. It became very quick and very clear that I can't do those things. I can't be in a relationship and be a father figure to a small child if I'm covered in vomit and passed out somewhere. I kind of started toying with the idea in my head of getting sober. I didn't have any interest in doing like a 12-step program. I did one before back in the day. My mom really pushed for me to go to an AA thing, and I hated every second of it. I don't knock AA or NA. They help tons of people, and that is great. But for who I am, it wasn't an option for me. And I knew that. I think the thing that scared me the most was being able to tell my friends and admit to myself, like the self admission of saying, listen, I have a problem. I need to help myself and I need my friends to support me. So luckily, I remember getting to the point where I messaged all my friends and I said, hey, listen, I'm done drinking. I'd really appreciate if you guys would support me. And then I kind of like waited for like the text back, like what that was going to be. And to me, I don't know why I was nervous because I have really good friends, but there's like voice in the back of your head, the little nagging voice that's saying they're going to think you're scared or they're stupid or it's just whatever. Like you had all these negative thoughts coming at me. Luckily, all my friends came back and they were like, listen, man, if you think you have a problem, then we're here for you. We'll support you. And they're like, maybe it's a good thing. And that was it. So once I got my friends behind me, I knew my mom and dad would support me and my brother. So I kind of knew that I had that support system there. So I just told everybody, I said, hey, listen, I'm done drinking. Don't ask me to drink. Don't offer me a drink. I don't want any of it. And that was it. I kind of just started on that road and I didn't know what to expect and I didn't know what to do and I didn't know what was going to happen. But I basically just stopped cold turkey. I quit January 22nd is my soberversary. I quit that day and I've never touched a drop of alcohol since. And I'm
Wow.
going on 11 and a half years. I'll be January 22nd will be 12 years.
Yeah. Congratulations on that, by the way. That is
Thank you.
fantastic. And were there times during the past almost 12 years where you felt like you might actually go back to drinking? Were there times where you felt you needed that in your life again, or have you been able to kind of steadily handle that?
So like getting sober is like learning how to like it's learning how to deal with life all over. I started drinking because I couldn't cope with things in my life. I didn't know how to properly deal with stuff. So I had a trauma that happened and I couldn't process it properly. So I drank. And then the drinking made things in my life really bad. So I couldn't handle that. So I drank. All the things that were bad were all because of drinking. Once I stopped, things started to get better. So life started to get better and things started to get better in my life. My health started to get better. I felt better about myself. I was more positive. I started having a lot more ambition to achieve goals and things like that and like chase dreams and be this re-inspired person. But yeah, I had to learn how to deal with life. And life is no joke. It comes at you. I lost my mom in 2015. I lost my dad in 2017. They're basically like a year apart. So there are things that test you. Life tests you. It throws tests in your path. It'll put these speed bumps there. I've never had a moment where I was just sat like holding a bottle thinking, I'm going to drink this. But there have been moments in my life where I thought, wouldn't it be easier just to say, forget this and down a bottle and throw everything away? But I throw everything away. I throw everything away. The knowing that I'd throw everything away is the thing that keeps me from saying, I'll never do it again. Yeah. So there have been moments in time where I've had like funny moments. I've had weird moments. I worked at a restaurant and pub and I was behind the bar because it's part of my job. I have to be back there making drinks and stuff like that. And I made a drink and the smell of it sent like something to my brain. And the little pleasure part of my brain goes, ooh, you like that. And I kind of was like, all right, I need to get away from the bar for 5 minutes because I can't be behind there because my brain's doing funny stuff. So yeah, it is a challenge. What I'll say about recovery is that in the programs, they say it's like one day at a time. You take it one day at a time. Everything is one day at a time. It really is like that. Like you have to live your life like that because at any moment, something could happen. It could challenge you in a way that you weren't expecting it to challenge you. And it's how you move forward and deal with that and how you cope with those situations and how you process that information without turning to drink or drugs. That's the new life. That's the way to move forward. I've had moments where
Yeah.
it's tested me.
That's not a linear journey. So, yeah. And as you said, you used alcohol as a coping mechanism because you experienced loss and trauma. So, did you find other coping strategies that helped you then move forward from not having to use alcohol anymore? You mentioned the gym and any other things that you found that kind of helped cope with these losses and the trauma. Did you learn to process them?
I've learned how to process the trauma, the things that have happened in my life. I use running. Running is a great tool for me. I can go put music on and just kind of like zone out and get all the good stuff. Because what people don't realize too is that doing activity, physical activity, whether it's the gym or running or any type of sport or whatever, it releases endorphins in your brain that cause just like a positive chain reaction. It releases all the good stuff in your mind. If I ever feel like I'm having too much anxiety or too much stress or I'm feeling a bit depressed, if I go out and I have a 2 mile run or I go to the gym and I lift and I have a run, I feel so much better about life. I feel like I can process the information in a better manner. I process it in a positive way. I'm not focused on negative bits of it, or it definitely helps me break things down a lot better. So a lot of that kind of helped. Early in my recovery, I did a lot of mixed martial arts, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, boxing and kickboxing, and that was probably more for the anger. When I drank, I was very aggressive. I got angry. I got into a lot of fights. I had my nose broke a couple times. I broke my hand. I had a lot of run-ins with police due to this type of behavior. It wasn't a healthy way to be releasing those type of feelings. I was acting aggressively because one, I was so inebriated that I didn't care. The scary part was I didn't care about myself and I didn't care about anybody else. I didn't care about the people that I was hurting, the people that I was hitting. I didn't care about any of that. I just cared about the release of it all, getting it all out. And then I wake up and just feel like crap because I was either in a holding cell or in an emergency room because my nose is broken and my eyes black and how do I explain this to my mom and dad when I go over to their house? Just, yeah. So I had these moments where I learned in my recovery to process the anger. I thought to myself, oh, you want to be tough? Go to an MMA gym, go fight guys that fight back. So I did that for like 3.5 years, became a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, competed in tournaments, won tournaments. So that definitely was like a huge positive release, positive way to channel what was going on internally, externally. And that helped me focus that energy in a positive manner for good things.
Yeah, so important. I'm wondering, what was that like as you decided to become sober and looking back and realizing that you may have emotionally or physically hurt people? What was that realization like for you as you were sober looking back? And were you able to manage those feelings that came up surrounding that? Because I imagine that would have been tough to deal with as well.
Yeah, well, I think the hardest thing is the people you hurt like, are the ones that you love the most. Like my mom, my dad, my brother. I really damaged those relationships by being the person that I was. I didn't really try to think too much about the people that I got into physical fights with. Most of those people I never saw again because I moved out of my hometown to a different place. And then I moved further and further away from all that kind of stuff. I mean, yeah, I do feel bad that I went and did the things that I did. There's nothing I can do to change it. If I saw the people today, I would apologize for my behavior. Whether they'd be willing to accept that, I don't know. But I don't hold on to it because it doesn't do me any good. It doesn't help me move forward if I hold on to stuff like that. I just made sure that I repaired the relationships that were closest to me, like my parents. My mom got to see me sober for 3 years, 3 full years of her life. She got to see her son be the person that she knew he could be. And that is what that gives me comfort. And that my dad got to see me get sober and change my life. And my brother has been one of my biggest supporters. I put him through a lot of stuff and stress because I put my mom through a lot of stuff and stress. And our relationship was good, but it was definitely during my drinking. There was definitely a lot of space between us as far as how close we were. Now I can say that we are as close as two brothers can be. By the way, we're 17 years apart. So he's much older than I am. So we have 17 years gap between us. We're as close as we can possibly be. And I'm happy for that because he's my brother and I love him. And he's been so supportive through my entire life and through all this trauma. We both lost parents and we lost them together. And he was there for me and I was there for him. And if I would have been drinking during that time, who knows? Who knows what could have happened? I'm just grateful that I have prepared the important relationships in my life to a point that I'm satisfied, that I've made my amends for that, accepted the responsibility for the actions that I took, and I've moved forward and I've built a different life.
Yeah, it sounds like you also have to practice a lot of self forgiveness to make sure that you can heal through all of that and let all those things go. Yeah.
You have to just accept. You have to accept things that have happened. And I think that was the biggest thing, even getting sober, is just accepting the fact I'm different than everybody else. I don't drink like everybody else. It's just not who I am. It's not how I'm designed. I notice it now a lot more in my personality. I can see I'm not the kind of person who can just do something moderately. I'm either all in or all out. So when I drank, that's how I drank. It was all in, drink till you black out. I found it when I got into like lifting and running and jujitsu and stuff like that. I did it to the point where I burned myself out. I went so aggressively into it that my body just, I started getting like injured in jujitsu. My shoulder would be sore. I'd have knots in my back, but I would just push myself. Like I'd wake up in the morning and I'd be like, I need to run 2 miles today. And I get on the treadmill and I'd run 2 miles. No matter what it was, I had to run 2 miles every single day. It took a long, long time for me to get to a point where it'd be like, it's okay to not have to run every day. You don't have to go to the gym every single day. You can try to figure out how to do these things that you enjoy, but only do them when it's possible, when it's convenient. it took a long time to get to that point because I burned myself out. I went so hard and fast into it. Some people even say, like, you go from one addiction to the next. Like, I go on this run kick where I'm running 50, 60, 80 miles a month. I'm running 4 or 5 miles a day, every day, every day. I had to figure out that there is a little part of my personality that is like goes all the way. It goes all the way. It goes up to 100. And I have to figure out how to dial it back to 50. I'm okay with it today. I struggle sometimes if I don't get to go for a run over an extended period of time because it affects my mental health. I just think I use it for my mental health and it helps me just be a more better, calm version of myself. But yeah, I've had to learn that that's who I am. That's how I am. And I just have to accept all that. Because if I didn't accept it, I won't be able to be who I am right now, be where I am right now, doing the things I'm doing right now.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds like achieving a balance instead of kind of going from one addictive thing to the other, the balance, the tricky part. Yeah.
Mm.
I know a lot of people who have struggled with various addictions, and as they are healing, recovering, and finding their way, as they share their story, they sometimes come up against quite a lot of judgment and stigma around them and from different people and the public. Have you experienced anything like that? You said your friends were very supportive, but have you found that people judge you for having dealt with the story that you have dealt with, for having been addicted to alcohol? Do you find that you are judged for that at all?
I do think when you tell people that you're sober, I always get, why? Well, you don't drink at all. Oh, really? Why? Like they need to know. And then having to explain this whole story, like I don't want to have to go and like explain my whole story to somebody that I've just met or whatever. I just say, like, no, I'm sober, I don't drink. And they're like, not even a little, not even sometimes. I'm like, no, not at all. And they're just like, alcohol is a lot more easy to tell people you don't drink or you're sober or whatever because it's so common that people drink all the time. And if you don't, they do kind of find it strange. But if I just say I don't, I can usually get out of the situation quite easy. Or I just say, listen, I was a bad person when I drank. I don't want to be a bad person anymore. And they'll be like, oh, I bet you got stories to tell. And then they kind of like leave it at that. I'm pretty good with talking with people. So I'll just either turn it into like some banter or be like, yeah, well, I used to put people in the hospital and stuff like that, or like tell some war stories. And then they'll be like, oh, maybe it's better that you don't drink. And I'm like, yeah, it's probably better that I don't drink. But I've never come up against anybody who's like really horrible about it. And luckily, I've never had anybody be like, have a drink, have a drink, have a drink, because that would really upset me. I've never been in those situations. I've had people ask me if I wanted to drink, and I just tell them politely no. And they're usually okay with that. Or I'll just leave. I'll just get up and go. I won't be around it. I just won't deal with it. I find the older I get, the less I enjoy being around people who are drunk and in that state of mind that just I don't manage well with it. And I always think guys are trying to get into a fight and it just turns into this thing where I just don't want to be around those kind of people. I don't really entertain it anymore. I'm not out like that. So I don't usually have to answer the question. Sometimes with like work colleagues or things like that, it does come up because they're like, oh, you don't drink at all. And I'll just be like, no, I'm 11 years sober. And they're like, wow, 11 years. So they're usually more impressed with the fact that I'm 11 years sober than they are that I don't drink at all. They're just like, wow, that's amazing. Wow, good for you. That's usually the good way it ends, is they're just really proud that I'm 11 years sober or whatever.
Yeah, it's good to set boundaries, I think, for your own mental and physical health to kind of understand where those boundaries are for you and what you're comfortable with and what you're not, and what your needs are and what are not your needs. So, yeah, that's really well done. And you turned your journey into hope and sharing with others, and you have a podcast called Addictively Speaking. So, are you processing your own experiences through your podcast, or do you interview people and have them share their stories? How did this come about, and then what's happening on your podcast?
Basically, what happened with this is in America, I was part of a group, a grassroots community of people in recovery. I did projects like cleanup projects, community refurbishment stuff, like getting out there, showing that people in recovery are good people and they can make changes in their life. We're trying to show people that every person in recovery isn't just some junkie or some alcoholic who, whatever, like the stigma. We're trying to break that. So I did a lot of work with them. I had a friend, and me and him got sober at the same time, and he started this big organization. And he just was like, "Can you come and do this with me?" He's like, "I think you'd be great. You're good speaking. Like, we can do stuff with this." And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." He got me into that, and I started doing public speaking with them. We went to a couple schools in the Pennsylvania area. Upper Dauphin School does drug and alcohol day. So we did that 2 years in a row, where you went and I sat in a classroom full of teenagers, 15, 16-year-olds, and told my story, told my tragedies, showed my triumphs, which was amazing. So that was basically the beginning of it all. I started doing that, and he decided that he wanted to get into like podcasting or like multimedia stuff for the program for the Skook Recovers. And he set up lives, and he had a whole studio built in this barn that he had. So I'd come over and we'd do little like web shows or like podcasts. I guess it would be about like a video podcast. So we would do those every now and again. And yeah, it just kind of got me thinking like, oh, I could do that. I could do that like on my own. I could start my own thing. But again, like my fear of failure and what if nobody listens or nobody's going to care? You're just a guy in recovery. Nobody's going to care what you have to say. Nobody's going to care about boo hoo, you had a bad thing happen in your life, that kind of stuff. Like, so all the negative stuff played up in my head, and it played up for years. I moved to the UK, and I had this friend back in the States, and he was doing this podcast, and he was just doing it was like interviews with everyday people. My friend Anthony Blackwell Jr., he's basically the guy who inspired me to get a mic, get a laptop, and start recording. And he's been honestly really cool guy, super supportive of me. I can't ever say a bad word about him. He's helped me so much in this podcast game. Basically, watched him do this for a while, and then I messaged him, was like, "Hey man, how do I do this?" He was like, "Oh, hey, what's up? Yeah, give me a minute, I'll give you a call." And like we video chatted for about a half hour, and he told me like what he was doing and how he did it, blah blah blah, and just basically gave me a rundown of everything. And then I was like, "Okay, cool. Yeah, all right. That's what I'm gonna do then." I just decided last year in October, I told my wife, I said, "I'm gonna start a podcast. I'm gonna start a podcast about addiction and recovery. I'm gonna share my story. I'm gonna share other stories. I'm gonna try to interview professionals in the field. Yeah, I'm just gonna give it a go." A year ago, I got a setup. I bought a cheap mic. I just sat down and I started recording, and most of it was just my stuff, my story, unpacking things that I've been through or sharing little things that help me get through the tough stuff in the beginning. So the trauma, the hurt, the coping, all that kind of stuff. So in my earlier episodes, they're all about like trauma, the ripple effect. Trauma is one of my episodes, addiction, the ripples, the ripple effect of what my stuff did to all the other people surrounding me. So I just started cranking out episodes and didn't know really what I was doing or how I was going to do it. And yeah, I've kind of leaned on my buddy ABJ, and he helps me, gives me advice, taught me all the social networking stuff, and then getting on the all the Instagram and Facebook, creating a page. And I had a logo created by a guy named Eddie. His name's Eddie Atu, and he's his Culture Soldier gear, and he created my whole logo. Really nice guy. Honestly, I met him on like one of these freelance websites. Stays in touch, watches all my stuff, comments. Really great guy. But yeah, kind of helped me get into the podcasting thing. And I've been doing it ever since, and just trying to get better and share people's stories, share their hope and inspiration. Because at the end, I'm just trying to help people figure out how to get sober and how to stay sober, because that's it. The hardest part is admitting it and then doing it. You just have to get moving on it.
Yeah, amazing work that you're doing. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us today and being vulnerable and talking about some of the things that were difficult and the parts that were hard that we usually kind of gloss over and don't talk about. So Thank you so much for doing that. And if listeners have enjoyed this episode and they want to know how to connect with you, where can they find you? Obviously, your podcast is with the podcast providers, and we'll link to it in the show notes, but where can people find you?
I'm on Instagram. It's at addictivelyjk. I'm on Facebook, and I think that is just addictively speaking. It might be the same as the Instagram. Sorry. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah,
When you
no
have
worries.
multiple pages, you're like, oh, I have so many pages, and I'm going through them all the time thinking, what is this one? The Facebook is addictively JK, so it's same as the Instagram is at addictively JK. Those are my Facebook accounts, and then I'm on YouTube as well, which is the Addictively Speaking podcast.
Amazing. And we will link to those things in the show notes for sure. Make sure that people know how they can get a hold of you and how they can listen to your podcast. And definitely check out our show notes for knowing how you can get in touch with James if you've been inspired by his story today and you want to know more. Maybe you want to chat with him or watch his podcast on YouTube. Make sure you check out the show notes. Well, this has been another incredible episode. And I really hope our listeners have found today's journey into addiction and recovery as interesting and helpful as I have. I've learned from you so much in the time that we've spent together. So thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me today. And thanks for your time and your wisdom and sharing your journey, James.
Oh, no problem. Thank you so much for having me. It's been amazing. I'm just always grateful to be able to speak to people and reach people to help people. I mean, if it helps one person, that's what it's all about, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to getting this message out and sharing your story with the world. So thank you so much and take care.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Journey podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Journey on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejourney.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.